Hello and welcome back to another Sky Game Week preview. This week we're looking ahead to Game Week 20 and we do have a lot of interesting topics to talk about this game week, so make sure you stick ahead to the end. We're going to move the transfer section into the spreadsheet bit. We're going to kind of combine those two because I feel like it wasn't really working as well as I would like and it was taking up a bit more time, so we are going to do those two together today. So if you're looking for the transfers, that is where they will be, but of course we are going to start off this week with the average remaining transfers as we always do, and there's not much of a change to be honest from last week. I think most of the game seems to be trying to conserve as many transfers as possible up to the overhaul, and in terms of like the average remaining ones, it's not dropped too much. I think the top 10 was sitting about like 5.6 or something around that. The top 100 was about 15.4. So there's really not been much movement whatsoever in there. But again, it just shows you if you're sitting about the top 1,000 and you are sticking around with the top 30 or with the 30 transfers that we have been talking about for so long at the overhaul, you are definitely still in with a very, very good chance because again, they are looking like about 19 transfers as the average. And you need to imagine that a lot of the good players right now are within the top 1,000. They are still on about 30 plus transfers, so there is a big chunk of those people who are probably like below 15 transfers, and the second half of the season you're really going to start to see the good players start to rise in rank, and then that is really when you start to see the average remaining transfers start to go up a bit. But as I said, there is a lot of interesting things to talk about in this week's game week, so we are going to jump onto that right now. So, of course, if you've been looking or keeping an eye on the games, you know that the Bournemouth Luton game did end up getting abandoned. I think it was about the 65th minute or so. It happened after Tom Lockyer collapsed in the pitch. So prayers to him, prayers to his family and everyone who's kind of close to him. But of course, the kind of question that everyone has been talking about recently is what's going to happen with the points. This is the statement that Sky put out on their Twitter page, saying points for Game Week 19 won't be finalised until Thursday. In regards to Bournemouth Luton, we won't make any decisions till we know more about the fixture. So there's two ways in which I think the Sky could handle this situation. I think option one, they either keep all the points that were given, and then the future game, when the game does get replayed, if it does get replayed, they obviously could settle on a draw, in which case it probably would be the best option for everyone, that the game just counts as a 65-minute game, but they could keep the points, then everyone gets another game out of Solanke later on down the line, whether that's before the overhaul or whether that's early January or whatever. We're not really going to be too sure until anything actually gets announced, or they could scrap all the points altogether, which, in my opinion, I think the points should stand. I think the amount of people, especially because it is such a, Solanke was such a big transfer in this week. Me personally, I brought him in one team, captained him in one team. I think you'll see with the transfer stats when they come around, I think he's the second highest transfer in this week. And you can't just pretend like the game never happened, because that's everyone using a valuable transfer on someone to possibly come in and captain while Haaland's out. The fact that the amount of people have actually taken Haaland out to bring Solanke in as well, but I think taking away the points as if it was just a blank game week, like no one is going to be bringing Solanke in this week or last week if they knew that game week wasn't going to go ahead. Obviously it is a very, very tough situation to be in, but I think wiping the points would be totally unfair. But on the other hand, I do think it would be quite unfair for people to get an extra game out of it, possibly before the overhaul, as in getting to keep the points over the weekend, and then Bournemouth get to play Luton again either before Christmas or after Christmas, whatever really happens. I think of course it's a very, very tough situation for basically FPL, Sky, all kind of fantasy football games to be in. I think the points should stand though, because of the fact that people have transferred that player in, and it's just totally unfair to imagine that the game wouldn't have gone ahead. For me in my first team, it would be more beneficial if Solanke's points got wiped. So you'll see with just below me how well my first and second team are doing. With my first team, I probably got up to about like 5,000 something. if Solanke's points get wiped. My second team, obviously, I had Solanke and captained them. In which points you get 18. I get 18 points from captaining Solanke, so if they get rid of that, I get the 18 points missing. Plus, on that day, I would have probably captained Rodri, who I think get 5 points, which means that's another 5 points that I'm missing because I didn't captain Rodri. So we're talking like 20 plus points missing here for people that would have captained Solanke on Saturday, and I think despite the amount of points that it is, it would just be totally unfair for the points just to get totally wiped. So we'll see what happens. Might not happen until even next week's game week preview when we find out what happens with that. Hopefully it's probably like Friday morning or so, where we actually get some news on what happens. But that's my point of view on it. But again, it is a totally tough situation, and I think either way, there's going to be people that's unhappy. But we will see what happens. But let's take a look at the transfers anyway. So as you can see, Dominic Solanke was the second highest transfer in this week. With the transfer stats, I don't think FF stuff has updated since the 15th of December. So this is really only 3 days. We don't have the last 4 days of transfers, but probably should kind of match anyways. I don't think there's really going to be too many transfers over the last couple. In terms of transfers in, Ollie Watkins was the highest transfer in, which I'm quite surprised about that amount of people don't actually have him. But he is obviously the obvious captain for Friday's game with the single against Sheffield. So if you are missing Ollie Watkins, I would definitely be looking to get him in just purely for that captaincy, because he could easily get a big haul there. And of course you'll be captaining him as well. Solanke as well, probably one of the most, or what looks to, according to the transfer stats, the most popular transfer when it comes to Haaland's replacement. We also get Trent, of course, who has been absolutely fantastic. I think we're talking like the last 10 game weeks, Trent scored 5+ points, and he's made his way up to the third highest scoring defender in Sky so far. So I think for me, I'll definitely be looking to get him in when my overhaul squad. Again, I've literally not looked at the fixtures or anything after the overhaul. There's really no need to do that. But just off of what's happening right now, I think Trent's definitely going to be there. I'd rather pay the 1.1 million for Trent than Van Dijk as well, I think, because Trent just has a big attacking potential. I think you could end up seeing him score like 2 or 3 goals if he starts to play in midfield as well, which could be fantastic, especially as a defender. Saka as well, a popular transfer in. I feel like he's here every week anyway. And then Emi Martinez as well. Bit of a surprising one, to be honest. I think obviously a lot of people are looking for goalkeepers with the amount of goalkeepers that are out right now. Villa obviously are in some decent form, and if maybe it's just a captaincy cover for those who don't have Watkins for Friday night. Personally, I think Watkins is just a much better captain, but that could be the reason for bringing Martinez in. And these people obviously could have Palmer as well for the Chelsea Wolves cover. Haaland, also the most transferred out player. Pretty obvious there, he is way above everyone else. We did get some news as well today that it looks, he obviously isn't in the lineup for today's Club World Cup match, but I've seen a source on Twitter say that he won't be involved in any of the Club World Cup matches, which is very interesting. Because it kind of puts doubt in our minds on whether he will play against Everton or Sheffield. So we'll see more news for that. I think that's very bad news for those who kept Haaland, because they have already missed out on 1 or 2 games for a lot of players. But again, I think if you've held him now, you might as well wait and see what happens with that. But for those of us that took him out, it might be a safe transfer. We might not actually need to bring him back for those games, which would be beneficial, because we all do save a transfer for that. We've got Trippier as well, a common transfer out, obviously was suspended over the weekend. Rob Sanchez obviously injured. Isak was injured as well. I think they said he's still carrying some pain from the groin injury that he had previously, which is very interesting, very surprising as well, because he was a very popular Haaland replacement last week as well. A lot of people brought him in last Sunday, and then obviously he didn't score. Wilson came on after about 60 minutes, which was very disappointing. And then of course Isak isn't even in the squad this week. So for me in my second team, I've got Isak. I've had him for about 2 or 3 weeks now. and he hasn't been great. I think for me, it's just I've had 2 lessons now bringing Isak. And both times I've kind of been punished by Callum Wilson, where I thought that he was out and then Callum Wilson ends up coming back and then it's totally ruined. And then Ederson as well, a popular transfer out. Again, I'm surprised he was that highly owned in the game that he's made the top 5 out transfers. Of course, they are blanking this week as well, so that explains that one. Alright, so looking at captains, we do have so many fucking games this week that I'm running out of space on the screen. But for captains, we do have 7 game days, and then I've included Thursday's game as well with Palace and Brighton, as that is just 2 days away. So you'll see who I believe the best captains are going into this week. We will run through them quick. Obviously, Crystal Palace, Brighton will probably be a popular skip this week. However, I think if you're looking for a captaincy and you don't have a captain for the 2nd of January, which is West Ham and Brighton, I think it does make sense to just bring in Pascal Gross, because you're getting 2 captaincies out of him before the end. I do really think that would be worth it. Obviously, if you've got someone like Jared Bowen or you've got Mohamed Kudus, you probably could easily skip this game because you do have captaincy cover for the 2nd, and I do think they probably are better captains. Like, I would rather have Bowen on that day than Gross. But if you are looking for a captaincy, that's what I would do. In terms of Friday, obviously we went for Watkins against Sheffield United. It just makes the most sense. Like, I don't think there's any Villa player that I would rather have than Ollie Watkins. If you wanted to really, really punt on it, maybe Leon Bailey, but definitely wouldn't recommend bringing that transfer in. That's more of like an FPL punt. I would not be doing that on Sky. So Watkins is definitely the man. In terms of whether Emi Martinez can cover him, I think they will keep a clean sheet, so it is possible, but Watkins could easily score like 2 or 3 goals. So he has a much, much higher ceiling than Martinez does. But I think if you're going to go for Martinez, I think you could definitely expect a clean sheet in that game, and then maybe some saves as well. I doubt the saves, but Martinez seems to be picking saves up every now and then, so could definitely cover Watkins if Watkins doesn't bang. In terms of Saturday's game, originally I did have Isak in here because Callum Wilson was supposed to be out. I think Isak against Luton would have been a great captain, but now it's just going to be Salah, I think, against Arsenal. I think a lot of people will go for Son on that day though, but recently with Richarlison back, Son is back to playing on the left. And that was our big thing for not having him originally, because he wasn't as effective off the left hand side. So I think if Richarlison's going to be playing striker, Son's off the left, and with the form Everton are in right now, I think even with a tough game for Liverpool, I probably would captain Salah over Son, just because of those reasons. Obviously Son could end up just banging anyway. Like, he has scored from the left, it's not like he's totally unusable from there. But I do think Richarlison's probably the better option for Spurs now if he is going to start playing or keep playing striker. So for me, I do think the best pick there would be Mo Salah. Christmas Eve, Sunday's game, Wolves and Chelsea. I think now that Cole Palmer is officially going to be playing in that game, he didn't pick up his yellow card. He definitely looks like the best pick. Could also, like, I think this is one of those ones where there's going to be loads of different captains on that day. Like, a lot of people are going to have Petkovic, including myself. A lot of people are going to have Sa from the Fulham Wolves game as their captain there. A lot of people will have like Thiago Silva, maybe Disasi, and then of course Cole Palmer as well. So I think there'll be lots of different captains on that day. But the form Palmer's in, how cheap he is, and how much owned he is as an enabler, I think he's probably the best captain. We'll see what happens with Nkunku. I think he's supposed to get about 20 minutes, maybe half an hour off the bench in the Carabao Cup game this week. So we'll see if he starts on Sunday, but I think he could be quite good. But I think in terms of the safe option, Cole Palmer is definitely the pick there for captaincy. On Tuesday, again, Newcastle Forest. You could easily go for a Newcastle player, maybe if you had Trippier or something. He could be quite decent, but I feel like there's no better pick than going for Salah against Burnley, even though it's an away game. It just makes the most sense. If you've got Salah, you are going to be captaining him. Wednesday, of course, it's going to be Erling Haaland. Whether he's back or not, though, is a different story. Again, if you've got a Chelsea player, I think Cole Palmer could be quite good if Haaland definitely isn't back by then. And then if you've got Rodri as well, you could go for him. But yeah, I think Haaland definitely if he is available. If not, you might actually find a lot of people that don't have a captain on that day. Obviously, if you've got your Chelsea Wolves captain, if you're going to be skipping the Christmas Eve day, you might struggle to find a captain for Wednesday, which gives you even more reason to not skip that Christmas Eve single. Because if Haaland is ended up ruling out, or he is ruled out for Wednesday, then you have a second captaincy for your Chelsea or Wolves player. And then Thursday, I don't know why I've got Saka in here. Okay, so I've just realised that I've cut out the Arsenal and West Ham game at the bottom, so it isn't a single, of course, otherwise we would have known that well in advance. But Thursday, 28th of December is Brighton Spurs, and then there's also Arsenal v West Ham. Again, another day where you could argue that Son is the best captain, but again, like I said, with him playing off the left, it might not be as effective. So I think this is the one day up until Christmas where Saka is probably going to be the best captain. I think a lot of people might have got rid of him, in which case you probably have Son available there anyway, and where you can just captain Son. But I think if you've got Saka still, I would be going for him against West Ham at home. But West Ham have actually looked very, very solid recently, and Saka isn't known for scoring like big hat-tricks, so it's kind of a bit of a 50-50 if you wanted to go Son or Saka. But I think with Saka having the home fixture against West Ham, I would prefer him to Son as an away fixture to probably a stronger Brighton. Okay, so looking at the fixture gains then, I have actually just recorded this entire part and it was like 10 minutes long, and really realised that the mic was not working, so we are doing it again, and that is why the transfers are already here. So this is really what we kind of came to a conclusion with. Gross coming out to Thiago Silva was an option. Again, I did say that I don't really recommend this transfer, as you probably will need a captaincy for this West Ham game, but there is a 3-for-1 available with a lot of teams here. Again, maybe if you don't have Watkins, you could always move on to Watkins, but most teams have a 3-for-1 over Brighton, and you are skipping the Spurs game as well. Again, this could be something if you've got maybe like a double Brighton, if you've held on to Dunk and you've got Gross as well. I would probably maybe advise moving Dunk on, and then you could keep whoever it is until the overhaul. I don't know. I think it could be another one if you've got someone like Jared Bowen as well in your team. If you've got Bowen covering this captaincy off, it could be quite good even just to move Gross on. Again, wouldn't recommend it. I think saving transfers right now is definitely the best point of action. I've went for Thiago Silva because you're getting a 4-for-1 out of it. Again, this could really be anyone. I wouldn't go for Cole Palmer because obviously any booking in any of these last 3 games and he is missing the next one. Again, it's the same as this Wolves game, a 4-for-1, 4-for-1 as well, obviously with Ollie Watkins. But you can kind of just see all the highlighted teams, see what kind of fixtures they've got, and then you could maybe look at that. Again, we'd only be looking at this if you have loads and loads of transfers and you have a West Ham player, even Kudus, covering off that single, and you don't really need a Brighton player after this captaincy against Palace. Then we looked at taking or for getting Haaland back in, some possible players to take out. I think Newcastle looks quite good. You can see that here after they play Luton and Forest. You're only really got that Liverpool single, in which case you're going to have Salah as the cover there anyway. And then obviously if Haaland is fit, which we don't really know yet, we are talking literally next Wednesday, before the Everton game. So if he's unfit now, unable to play throughout the whole Club World Cup, which is just throughout this week, is he really going to be fit for Wednesday? I'm not too sure. But him alone as the Sheffield game, you probably are going to want him. Is it going to be worth a transfer? Probably, which is going to be very annoying if he is fit by then. So hopefully it just takes an extra couple of days to recover, and they won't be back until after the overhaul. But we will see what happens with that. But again, Solanke as well, you would be getting him out for the Spurs game, and then bringing Haaland back in, and then similar to Tsimikas, you'd only really be missing the Newcastle game, in which case you would have Haaland as your cover as well. Just in case as well, if Haaland is definitely out, looking at some possible replacements for the captaincy, you'd be looking right in here, which we already spoke about, possibly having someone like Palmer as your replacement, maybe Rodri as well. And then for Saturday, if he is going to miss the Sheffield game, again, you could possibly go for Palmer. I think Aston Villa, Burnley though, you would be going for Watkins there. Does definitely look like the best shout if Haaland is going to be injured for that one. But again, not really too many transfers to look at. We do have one more game week preview before the overhaul, which will be next week, and it's really just covering these, so there's not going to be any transfers again next week. But again, not really too much to look at this week. In terms of 3-for-1s, there wasn't really anything going on, except for that Brighton one, but again, probably wouldn't really be too interested in that. So let's go and look at my team now. So another decent week for me in game week 19, 2 more green arrows up to 6.5k and 8.1k. In this team I didn't have Solanke, so if the points are going to get wiped, it will benefit this team quite a lot. I do think the Solanke points, especially for those who captain, should at least put me in the 5,000s. Did captain Rodri in this day, managed 8 points, which was quite good. Quite happy with that. Ended up with passes and tackles. And then transfers, took Haaland out and went for Gross, so I do have the captaincy cover. And then took Sanchez out and went for Petrovic. That way I do have the Chelsea cover for Christmas Eve. In terms of captains, I can't really look at it this week because obviously the game week is still going on, so we won't be able to look at that, but it is pretty self-explanatory who the captains are going to be. I'm leaning more towards Salah for Saturday. Obviously my captains aren't going to really be much different from what I believe the best captains were early in the video. But again, an 81 point week, stuff's looking pretty decent. All the captaincies are now covered in this team, and I feel like it's looking pretty good. So if Haaland's going to be injured next week as well, then I don't feel like I need to make any more transfers in this team. Having 29 transfers, I don't think is going to be the end of the world. It's only one over what I would previously have wanted. And considering the amount of injuries and everything that's been going on, I don't really think that's too bad. In the second team, however, I did bring in Solanke for Haaland and did captain him, which means if the points are going to come off for Solanke, that's 18 points gone, plus the fact that I did have Rodri originally as the captain, which means that's another 8 points gone. So if Solanke's points get wiped, that's 26 points that I'll be missing, which is probably going to be a massive decrease in the rank for the second team. But again, I don't really know what's going to happen. Just really up to wait and see what the game decides. This team was looking much better last week than the first team, but now with Isak looking like he's out and maybe not playing again, obviously with Wilson back as well, it doesn't look as good, and I'm obviously skipping the Chelsea and Wolves game in this team, so if the points get removed, this team's pretty much gone. Like there is obviously some sort of recovery if I can get lucky and maybe do a block defence or something after the overhaul, but this team will be so far behind. And again, only really had to make the Haaland transfer here where he went to Solanke, so we will wait and see. Hopefully we get some news soon on what happens with Solanke's points, but again, I think there's no getting away from it, the fact there's going to be a lot of disappointed people no matter what the outcome is with that. Again, probably my first team is probably just going to be beneficial if they do remove the points, but we will see what happens. But that is going to end off this week's Game Week preview. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like. I'll ask a question, I'll see how many of you actually have Solanke. Let me know down in the comments. And what do you think should be the outcome of the whole situation? Do you think Solanke points should stay? Do you think people should get the extra game out of it? Or do you think the point should just be wiped as well? Make sure to let me know down in the comments, and while you're there, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you all in the next video.